linear growth to exponential growth. We're coming from a world that was a Bayesian distribution, the bell curve. We are witnessing the change in the distribution of outcomes so that they will be much more like a Mandelbrot chaotic normal distribution. The thing that we're seeing right now in this great reshuffle is the fighting going on among former elites or supremacy becoming far more brutal and nasty. Look at the quality that has plummeted. Look at great newspapers on both sides of the debate. We were coming from a world where if they weren't writing and talking about it, it pretty much simply didn't exist. We now live in a world where we are daily, just the onslaught of daily news, of argument, of people shouting at each other and saying, you're wrong, I'm right, etc.
Could this year get any worse? Why?
Why?
Because the alternative is a fascist.
Has gotten to the point where we have exceeded our Shannon limits. Claude Shannon, the inventor of information theory, which makes Zoom possible, which makes the iPhone possible, which makes our modern world possible, also posited that there was only so much information a human brain could take in before it said, Uncle, mercy, I can't do this anymore. In this new world, it's much harder to hide. If you're a bad guy, not so great, because you're much easier to find, you're much easier to identify, which makes the nudging state a little more dangerous for many, many people. I mentioned in the beginning that there were many catchphrases, the great fill in the blank. Well, one of the ones I mentioned is the Great Reset. Well, the Great Reset is a thesis being advanced by the old powers that were. And if you want to have a good laugh, go and look at their campaign trying to persuade you that in 2030, you will own nothing and you will be happy. The ridiculousness of their campaign is very, very apparent to anyone who give them a moment of time looking at them. Their big mistake was not understanding that used to work, and now people simply see it as a thing to deride and laugh at. We now have forums everywhere in the world of social media where people can discuss these things. Now, many people will say, well, Jim, you're crazy. Social media is just noise. No, it really isn't noise. Actually, it is emerging as potentially a worldwide intelligence network. And here I'm thinking specifically of Twitter. But if Twitter acts up, so to speak, and starts being very authoritarian and throwing people off there for no good reason, the beauty of free markets will be there will be another mass meeting place, if you will, and Twitter will be no more. Do I see that happening? Probably not. But I can certainly see it happening to things like Facebook, to things like Instagram, to things like any other of the currently popular apps. The leverage that the internet provides creators, thinkers, makers of movies or podcasts, the list is literally endless. I was thinking the other day that in 1990, if you wanted to write something and you wanted people to read what you wrote, you really were at the mercy of the big publications. So if you couldn't get a spot at one of the big newspapers or one of the commentary journals or any of the specialized journals that say you were interested in fishing, you couldn't write anything about that unless that journal gave you a spot. Today, if you have a cell phone and you have a connection to the internet, you have a potential worldwide audience at your fingertips. I mentioned Matt Clifford and his calling the internet the greatest variance amplifier ever seen in human history. And I think he's absolutely right. Think about what it would have cost you if you wanted to be a movie maker in, let's call it 1999.
Guns. Lots of guns.
If you wanted to make The Matrix in 1999, and yes, that's when the original Matrix came out, wow, what you needed was huge amounts of capital. You needed not only huge amounts of capital, you needed a studio to back you and distribute that movie through movie theaters where people would go and watch it. You needed to hire actors at rates that varied depending on how big of a star that particular actor was. You needed not only first directors, but second directors and third directors to get everything right. And you needed equipment that would bankrupt your average human being, from the cameras to the special effects to all of those things. Basically, you required an army to make The Matrix. Not anymore. You can now essentially be a single creator. And with an iPhone, the later the better, and a Macintosh, you can create a theater quality movie completely on your own. Think about that for just a minute. You, the creative individual, can now, if you are in possession of an iPhone and a Macintosh, create a movie that if you didn't tell people that it was made on an iPhone with a Mac, they would not be able to tell the difference. The ability to use this leverage has never been this great. And the demand for this type of content has never been this great either. And when we revisit into 2023 and 2024, demand will have gone up. Everybody wants to be in the streaming business now. And another difference is, in the old days, if you made a movie and they didn't release it or it didn't go into wide release, nobody saw it. Nowadays, you don't even have to think about a theater release. There are so many streaming services that will bid against each other for your movie that even within just a little invested capital, you're probably, if it's good, you're probably going to be able to sell that to one of the streaming services. And that game is actually a war from these huge companies like Apple, like Netflix, like Amazon. All of them, Disney Plus, all of them are getting into the streaming wars, and they have a voracious appetite for content. People who in the past simply had no opportunity to pursue their passion now have huge opportunities everywhere. And one of the things that is being taken away are the rules that the dominant institutions want us to play by. Media is an obvious example.
Fucking thing sucks!
Another obvious example is government. When COVID hit and we watched, we saw that it wasn't just our emperors in whatever country we were watching from that were naked. All of the emperors of all the countries were naked, and people saw that. Once you see that the emperor is naked, it's very, very hard for him or her to put clothes on again. COVID also created this crisis in which governments were exposed as horribly informed, horribly organized, and horribly educated about how to really do something and do it well. And people saw that. And so people started talking about, what can we do here? One idea was that we start jurying everything governments do.
So there are two other ways to represent the people. One is an election. We know that well, and we instinctively think that's the only way. How could you have a democracy without elections? And you can't run a government with 6,000 people getting together once a month. So what they did is they are the equivalent of Athens' local council, the place that ran the show, was 500 randomly selected citizens who sat on this body for a year, and they just got rolled over again and again. A system in which people take turns in governing and being governed. So there isn't a governing class and a governed class. That's what he would call an aristocracy or an oligarchy.
The jury system is one of the oldest in the Western world, where you pick people at random. Juries have proven themselves robust over time because the people in that room are generally not trying to attain some place of power. They're generally not trying to say, look how important I am.
I am the king.
They are simply ordinary human beings who are willing to listen, look at the facts, and come to a conclusion. What's fascinating about this is that their conclusions are often at the opposite end of the conclusions that the politicians are pushing. Will this become a dominant way to pull governments in? Perhaps, I don't know. But there will be another thing that will make it very difficult for them, and that is the mobility of capital. Prior to maybe 10 years ago, the mobility of your capital was pretty hard to really move at light speed, so to speak. Someone once asked me, what would you do if the United States actually had a coup? My answer to that person was, you would see a GPS image of planes leaving the United States and carrying on them, you guessed it, all of the people who provide the capital. That type of escape was never possible in other time periods. Another example, of course, is health. I think we bungled very badly the debut of the mRNA platform by calling it a vaccine. People had in their mental state, the label vaccine really meant something very specific.
Unlike some other types of vaccines, mRNA vaccines do not contain any pieces of the virus. Instead, the COVID-19 mRNA vaccine teaches our own cells to make the quote-unquote spike protein found on the surface of the coronavirus, triggering an immune response. In short, they help our bodies produce antibodies specific to the virus, along with T cells that also confer immunity. These vaccines do not affect or interact with your DNA, and the mRNA never actually enters the nucleus of the cell.
The mRNA was developed for COVID, yes, but now already in the works is an mRNA treatment for malaria. Malaria is a very, very serious problem in many parts of the world that claims millions of lives. If you could create a drug that allowed people in malaria regions to not die from malaria, that is a massive, huge advance in medicine. The world that we're living in right now is probably the most chaotic world in terms of innovation, in terms of choices available, in terms of the opportunity set for clever people. It's new in that these types of opportunities, this type of leverage, just simply didn't exist in the past. And that's why you see people seeking out people with similar points of view. It's an echo chamber, but it keeps echoing to you what you really desperately want to believe. We'll have an entire episode on how belief systems are changing. If you read a certain type of publication, your beliefs will be diametrically opposed to people who read other publications. Everybody sees the world differently. And it's been this way for a long, long time. But now we actually are seeing more and more evidence that this is true. The cartoonist Scott Adams, himself controversial, has come up with a very good metaphor for this. He says, people are watching two different movies, even when they're sitting in the same theater. Imagine, if you will, putting people in a theater, showing them a movie, and then interviewing them afterwards. The belief systems have become so truncated and so atomized that they will see completely different things and take away completely different examples. Now, this is a danger of the world we're going into, because it is extraordinarily easy for those who want to manipulate our human OS, for them to do it. I think one of the great things that will come out is going to be a way to inoculate yourself against these tricks and persuasive techniques. The meme wars, I guess, would be a great way to talk about this, because memes do have power. I'm talking about memes as Dawkins saw them, ideas that spread. Now we have social media where we can drop a meme, usually a colorful one, in the system, and it can spread well faster than anyone can try to figure out whether it has any veracity at all. The fitness of a meme has nothing to do with how truthful it is. It has everything to do with how easily that meme spreads from human mind to human mind. Many memes are completely non-truthful. They're lies. But it really doesn't matter if they replicate in other human minds at a speed that you simply can't keep up with. And the important test you want to use here when judging the power of a meme is, did the creator of that meme lose control of the meme? It replicates a bit like a virus. So there is a ton of things that we will be covering in this series. And what we hoped that you get out of it is actionable advice. It's fun to listen what might be happening, but I want to remind you of something that I always like to remind myself of and others as well. We could be totally wrong about these forecasts that we're making. People might miraculously decide they want to go back to offices. You never know. We could be wrong. That's why all of these are our hypotheses and theses on what we think could emerge from the Great Reshuffle. And so as we go through each episode, and we'll be covering health, we'll be covering education, we'll be covering business, we'll be covering creative endeavors, we'll be covering how you can learn on your own. Something I've always believed, and we hope that this helps you achieve, is knowledge without action is futile. Action without knowledge is foolish. What we want to try to help you do is take informed action. And we hope that after listening to the entire series, your reality goggles or reality tunnel will become much clearer, much better, and more importantly, help you make better decisions in both your life, your work, and your pursuits, the things that interest